everybody.
Yes.
Today we're here with Dr. Alan Turley, and he specializes in marriage therapy and also grief therapy and EMDR. And we thought we'd bring him in and pick his brain today to see what he can offer us. He has some incredible techniques of dealing with couples who have personality disorders and highly emotional couples as well. Dr. Turley, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Okay, well, I'm a pastoral counselor. I've had 15 years of being a pastoral counselor in different roles with adolescents and folks that are involved in marriage. I teach marriage and the family in local college. And I've also been doing grief therapy now for about 13 years. And recently trained in EMDR as well for folks that are dealing with PTSD issues.
Excellent. And your host, Miss Lynette Keller, is here. And of course, I'm Debbie. So let's get to moving. Miss Lynette, what do you have for us today?
Well, today we're going to talk, we're going to visit once again with the borderline and the narcissist, the relationship. But my approach today is I'm going to break down the clusters. We have what is known as cluster A, cluster B, and cluster C. This is important because the two personalities actually fall within cluster B. And so just to give you a little background, cluster A is more the person that is identified as being schizoid, schizophile, commonly associated with social awkwardness, in addition to social withdrawal. Cluster B, which is where we're going to be today, can be found with the borderline, the narcissist, and both show histrionic and antisocial behaviors.
Now, where do these clusters come from?
Well, they're broken down in the DSM-5, which is our purple book. It's like our Bible for disorders within the mental and behavioral health community that we can go to, and it helps to break down various personalities and behaviors based upon the information that's been researched and gleaned and tested and put into this one thick purple book that we can reference at any time. And it's really a great resource for a lot of us within the community because we can really address some things, even underlying issues that folks hadn't even considered we're able to address within, that one big purple book.
So it has like other sections in it, not just diagnoses, like maybe etiologies. And,
absolutely, absolutely. It's a complete manual. It's I think within the community we pretty much live and die by it because we can go to it, it's like there it is. So yeah, it's a great reference. And then we have what's called cluster C, which you will find avoidant, dependent personalities, OCD, along with high levels of anxiety. So what's interesting about our cluster B is we can have little sprinkles of both A and C found in B, which makes it a very interesting population of folks to work with, either the borderline or the narcissist. Never boring.
And that's where you have found an interest, a niche, if you will.
I have found a niche working with borderlines and narcissists, and my interesting contribution to working with them as couples is how they find themselves. Often you find borders and narcissists getting together to form couples, and I was introduced to this group from our folks that are working with our DBT group, which I think in a way is a wonderful setup to their approach to being able to look at couples counseling, because the DBT is helping them de-escalate the conflicts within their relationships and in their lives without blaming either themselves or others, which is a crucial skill to how to work with them as couples. I often find that they seem to feed each other. The narcissist seems to be fed by the borderline's need for acceptance. The borderline is fed by the narcissist's perceived confidence. And both of these thrive, sadly, on blaming. So getting first to that skill of trying to discuss issues without blame is imperative. And sort of a three-step process of first learning that skill of how to discuss issues and communicate without blame. I do that by exercise of the one issue. You have to stick with one issue per fight. Both love to bring stuff up from the past, and that's a foul. And often I feel like a soccer ref.
Do you actually call foul?
I have actually called foul in several meetings when the bringing up of the past and the issue, the one issue is being surpassed by other issues, and that's just an arguing technique and not an actual get better technique. I try to focus on new skills about how to argue and disagree without, again, resorting to blame, how to hear one another. And one of those steps is you can't speak in absolutes. Both, particularly the narcissist, loves to speak in absolutes. You never loved me. This will never work out. And then
always.
You always.
Yeah.
You never have. And that's crucial to understanding how the personalities fit together, but also how that dysfunction isn't allowing the relationship to move forward.
Sounds like effective communication is a big part of what you do.
Oh, it's a lot of
teaching it.
Yeah, a lot of reframing, a lot of, again, trying to think about how you communicate, and obviously with narcissists it's difficult to try to depend on empathy, so we just try to use it from a skill set. This is our skill set. This is how we're going to fight and argue better. Every relationship has conflict, so how do we do that better without blaming or speaking in absolutes?
What is reframing?
This is where I've heard something and I perceive that you're attacking me, and then we try to learn to reframe that to say, okay, well, when it was said that you don't help out enough around the house, you heard you never do anything around the house and you're a terrible person, and now that you reframe that to say, no, I need more help when doing housework. So learning to reframe a lot of habitual kinds of language, because particularly for couples that have been together for more than, let's say, 4 or 5 years, it's reruns. I call it reruns. We're having the same fight over and over and over. And so by trying to reframe it, we're trying to get at the root issue, and again, not dependent on having a professional around each time to have that.
That mediation between the two.
Right, you're having them both learn the skill of reframing, so they can catch themselves recycling that fight and saying, okay, well, what I need is for you to help me around the house. It's like, oh, well, okay, that they may actually hear, because of a lot of what we also work on is how do we hear without responding. All of us have the tendency to listen to a conversation only in terms of when do I get to speak next, and how do I fight and one up you or whatever. So with sticking with one issue, we try to say, okay, first, what have you been hearing when we have this discussion about the one issue? And then how can you listen without the need to respond, particularly in an escalating fashion? Then our third skill that we work on is called negotiating boundaries. Narcissists tend to have control issues, and borders tend to emotionally inflate and steamroll an issue. So neither are very good with boundaries. So trying to get them, you can't really say, okay, like read a book or go to a professional and have them institute a boundary. You have to negotiate a boundary. Okay, for your relationship, where can this issue have a person A and a person B part instead of one always crossing over that boundary to often hurt or try to take control of the issue. And the last one is a struggle at times for anybody, but obviously for this group, an even bigger struggle to see boundaries and to abide by.
Interesting. There's been quite a bit of research on both borderline and the narcissist, in that it's almost like they have this magnetic attraction to one another, and it's interesting to see. And they have a lot of shared background traits coming up by their relationships. Something that came out is that like the narcissist, the borderline never felt loved or valued.
Right.
So it comes into play a lot about when you talk about the relationship, how the narcissist in the beginning may appear to be very passionate, very loving, very supportive and nurturing, giving the borderline what has been needed for so long. And the trade-off is that this is not helping because they tend to feed off of one another. It's like the example before, the narcissist is constantly making up for what he didn't get. And then it's this constant, I would say, push-pull type
Yes.
relationship, which brings, such a dynamic to the couple.
Right, and they seem to thrive on that drama.
Because it's so parasitic.
Yeah.
They both feed off of each other, and that's why they sustain.
Mm-hmm.
Until, boom, they don't.
Yes.
And it's not an acrimonious separation. It is normally World War III. And there are no friends to be had afterwards. Either you love me or you hate me.
It's the black and white thinking.
Yeah,
Black
absolutely.
and white
All or
thinking.
none.
And there's not forgiveness. That whole negotiation thing, I even wonder if that's real. Or if it's just something that they're playing to try to make a relationship work. I wonder if they really internalize it and will use it the next relationship.
I would say probably not. I'm gonna guess again from a social behavior background. I would say I just need them to use the rule at this point. Do they really believe and do they internalize and empathize? I'm going to agree with you, probably not. But if I can get them to at least play within the arena and play by the rules that they've agreed on, most of the time, I won't say all the time, most of the time, then we can improve the relationship and try to have it have some forward momentum, because often they get stuck in that drama circle that you're talking about.
Feedback loop.
Yeah, and they're not making it progress.
Yeah. I remember reading research on ADHD kids. There was a series called The Indigo Children, written by a teacher whose grandchildren had been diagnosed with ADHD. And it was really interesting the way she classified them as indigo children, because she said they're just a different population than any other she'd ever seen. But one of the big things in her series had to do with negotiations, because she said so many ADHD kids also have ODD, which is oppositional defiant disorder, that if you instruct them, if you make a declarative statement, you will do this, they get, no, I'm not. They also found, per her research, that a lot of ADHD children had much higher than average IQs, which also put this into the realm of the gifted child. So when you go and you look at that sector, you find these same characteristics. You find characteristics of where you have to negotiate, of where you have to refrain. I mean, it's almost identical to what we're talking about. A lot of narcissism. So I wonder, I haven't seen any studies having to do with adults in clusters A or B or C, but I'm wondering if there might be a parallel there. We know that with borderlines, your average borderline has an extremely high IQ. Henceforth, a lot of the differences that set them apart does your narcissist.
It's interesting you bring that up.
I thought you might know. She's our research person.
Today I don't have percentages, but there is evidence to support that a lot of folks that we enjoy in the entertainment industry, movies, and theater, are narcissists and borderlines. And they are some of the most talented that are out there. I won't name any right now, but it makes for some nice research on a given day, just to see who is, and based upon their performance when you get out there and you see what they're doing, to include, going back to the academic side of it, the intellect. Borderlines, very smart intellectual people, very deep, profound, astute people. Narcissists, pretty much the same thing, but the approach is a little different by way of how it is projected in social circles. I think you mentioned before with the narcissist, it's that very authoritative means in which this individual projects themselves. It is that confidence, which is that allure, almost like a bee to honey or moth to a flame. If the borderline is in the room, they're drawn to that confidence because they're at extreme levels. And even with the assessments I've done here, the self-esteem is always significantly low with the borderline. Some may be able to project otherwise, but given the right intimate setting, the low level of self-esteem does reflect. Anything that's, according to Rosenberg, a person who scores 15 and above is about average. They have, so I'm bringing percentages today. 15 and above is healthy by way of self-esteem.
Right.
Anything below 15, and we start getting into the negative numbers, we have some serious issues, and that's usually where I find our population of borderlines. Within that low number.
There seems to be a common belief, I've heard it mentioned many times, that borderlines are narcissists. How does that happen?
The trait. There's a trait there where, again, the projection.
Mm-hmm.
The borderline, too, can come across as very authoritative when they present themselves, and especially if it's something that they're very passionate about, and there's no negotiation with that. There's no give and take with that. It's all, it is this, I declare this is how it is, and they will pretty much hold on to that until the death.
So is that not narcissism?
It is. It is, and you can find it in a borderline. Matter of fact, there's evidence to support that most common borderline children were raised by a borderline parent. I had some exposure to a borderline. Same with a narcissist.
So if they are bossy and stubborn, and they have low self-concepts, low self-esteem, how are they narcissistic?
It's like a defense mechanism. They can come back with it. If that individual, we're talking about the borderline right now, if borderline feels that they are under attack, and it may not necessarily be an attack, but it will be perceived as an attack, then it becomes very adversarial for the borderline and then the person on the receiving end of that trying to figure out, so where did that come from? But it's there. It is that defense mechanism of what it is that they're holding on to that they're not willing to let go.
How do you assuage that if you're the person who's receiving the brunt?
You know, even in my experience, and it's very limited here, I'm still learning how to do that because it is such a strong personality. It's very strong. Aside from the low self-esteem, when it turns into defense, it's very strong, and the energy from that is so strong it will wear you down. Hence the empath and the empathy, how it absorbs and drains the individual who's in that that moment with them. Do you have an experience having seen that with your couples?
Well, that's why we start step 2 trying to speak in non-absolutes, because the defense that you're talking about
It's like a resistance.
Well, and it's more than, I believe strongly in the issue. It's an investment of their whole being, and you've questioned their whole being, and their reaction is way over the top. It's at times it can be frightening, particularly when that reaction is triggered towards a child. They can become like very, again, speaking in absolutes, and say often things that they later, of course, regret, like I never wanted you, I never loved you. Again, the absolute talking is part of that trait because they feel somehow, like you're saying, the narcissist's response is, well, I'm absolutely right here, and everyone else is absolutely wrong. There is no gray area, and again, first learning to talk without absolutes is important, because when you try to get to those negotiated boundaries and those negotiated areas of a relationship, that is really tough for either of them to give up.
Mhm.
That absolute talk and that the feeling of being absolutely right or absolutely attacked.
You think it's because of that passion, because of that emotion that is so strong.
And that they're, again, it's not like, oh, I feel like a part of me is being attacked. Oh, like my intellect is being attacked, or my appearance is being. It's you're attacking all of me, so that I'm all in.
Mhm.
So the difficulty is the relentlessness of it.
Yes.
It becomes a relentless defense
Yes.
that, again, is almost, I call it guerrilla warfare. It never ends. You never see it coming. And disconnecting it, getting them to see that that's not productive for the relationship, can be difficult.
How does that stop? How does that other person with the borderline, how would the narcissist pull the plug on that? Effectively.
Effectively.
Better put that in there.
I've had some luck with getting them to see their behavior in that sort of seeing it from the outside. Again, the behavior, not them, this one behavior.
So you separate the behavior from the person.
Right.
And externalize the behavior as its own entity.
Right. So you talk
Okay.
about, okay, so if you saw a coworker that was being attacked and it seemed like it was going overboard, what would you do? And then, well, I would defend that person. I would get involved with that person. Okay. So we see that this sort of, over the top, and they pick up on it. They're, like you said, very high IQ. They pick up on it quickly, but because I framed it outside of them, that immediate "I must now fight you to the death" reaction is luckily usually not present, or you usually try to help them.
Okay.
So it's all in the approach and how you bring to their attention without bringing it directly to them. It's brought about indirectly to give them food for thought.
Right.
It's a sideways approach, like what DBT uses.
Yes.
One of the things you guys stress in your DBT group is that you don't do a front-on-front assault. When you do, what would we expect to see if the narcissist did the front-on-front with the borderline? How big of a boom would we get?
How could it not be? Is the
Right.
question. How could it not be, with both of those personalities being so strong and so relentless to the degree that it is a clash. So yeah, it's impossible for it not to be, which brings me to the question. A lot of research talks about how the two, it is really not healthy for the two of them to coexist in a marriage or a relationship. Through your experience, have you seen where it can evolve or develop into something healthy to where they can coexist in the same household, or maybe at least be amicable towards one another later on?
Yes, I've actually seen some. I think that if you'd gotten a group of marriage and family therapists and folks together and analyzed the relationship, no one would use the word healthy, but it works their way. It's again, that's why I have them negotiate their boundaries, because they've picked each other, and I always try to start with, that's my goal, is to get these two folks. Would it have been better had they picked other folks? Probably so. But that's not where we start. We start with the folks in front of us, and we get them to better functioning. And they often at times, from the outside, it might look like either one of two things: a recurrent conflict-oriented relationship, or a sort of without passion relationship, like roommates. But if both of those folks are okay with that, then I just try to get the relationship to function better. So I have seen it. We were talking about how to, handle the borderline. The narcissist is also difficult, trying to get them to see their actions particularly when it's difficult for them to empathize. So I use a goal structure for them. I'm trying to say, okay, what's your goal in the relationship? And then each point where a behavior is problematic, I go, okay, that's not getting you to your goal. In other words, again, externalize. This isn't about you. It's about the thing you want. And you're walking away from the thing you want. You need to be walking towards the thing you want. And again, sort of externalizing, but focus more on what's their goal in the relationship, because they often seem to do better with that than couching things in empathetic language.
Understood. I often wondered, I think we brought this up once before, maybe just in our social circle here, is, and I say again, with both personalities being so strong, what personality could withstand being in a relationship with either one? Because even though the borderline has their fair share of, moments of self-esteem, so on and so forth, they too can overshadow the person in the relationship, because it takes so much to be in the relationship. And then with the narcissist, again, that overshadowing, that personality being so big and so strong, overshadowing a person other than the borderline. So it makes me wonder, in all honesty, what personality would be able to sustain being in a relationship with either and still come out whole on the other side?
I think maybe someone who has a more phlegmatic personality, someone who is a type B, someone who's not so competitive and doesn't have to keep score, maybe someone who is really well adjusted and they don't have their own agendas. They don't have a secret agenda.
Sure.
Everything is pretty much upfront and open. The reason I think that is because I think that's what the borderline female looks for. Because you listen to them in the groups as well as I, and that's what I hear all the time, is that they're wanting honesty, they're wanting exposure, disclosure, they're wanting this self-esteem. They ask for an awful lot.
Yeah.
But they think, and they may be right, that they give a whole lot too. But they do expect it in return. And the personality, because when I'm talking borderline, I'm thinking female. And when I'm talking narcissist, I'm thinking male. So that's kind of my reference right now, and it can be either gender. It's not gender specific. But when I'm giving these examples, that's what I have in my head. And I'm thinking the borderline females who seem to be happy in relationships are the ones who don't feel that they have to be suspicious. They don't have to cast doubt. This trust thing with your borderlines is a huge deal. And if you make a small infraction, they'll never forget it. It'll be held over your head forever. There's no coming back from it. And they want someone that they can trust, whatever that means. And so I think that's the person. I don't know how many people there are like that out there, but maybe given an MMPI, which is a personality disorder test, before you date someone might not be a bad idea. And you can see what you have.
Interesting for a first date. One of the things that I saw with personality, since we bring up matters of trust, is when either of them are happy, particularly in a relationship, promiscuity can be a thing for both. Whereas one is not receiving whatever it is, and we'll use a female for example. Her needs aren't being met emotionally. She will seek out physical to get it. And it's pretty much the same thing for the male. So when these two come together, again, I keep using my hands to illustrate these two coming together. it can be something, and hence, the issues with trust.
Oh yeah,
because both have stepped outside the relationship to seek something that they believe or feel, or more than likely not getting from the other. So it's seeking out, which I believe brings something else to the table with you in therapy, perhaps, with your couples, that may present a serious issue.
Well, and it is a serious issue, particularly because narcissists tend to have this sort of almost like trigger-like mechanism. You were saying that boarders like to hold things forever. You couple that with a narcissist like trigger level of, I didn't get X met, so I will walk with no sense of guilt or remorse out of the relationship to do whatever, and then come back and act as if nothing's happened. It's
Unconcerned.
yeah.
Ooh.
It is at times breathtaking in how quick it can happen and how remorseless it is, and then of course the other person, then with the trust issue, feels that they can never trust, and then but neither wants to walk away.
Yes.
Because again,
Last
they're being
person
fed.
standing.
Yeah, but they're being fed in a way that other relationships don't feed their
Yes.
personality stuff.
Yes, and that's the passion.
Yes.
That's the passion right there. Yeah.
Yes. The something else that came out during the course of my research, the narcissist is between the two is the least likely to get in trouble with the law, whereas the borderline is the most likely to have troubles and run-ins with the law. And it is because of the raw emotion. It is because of the passion. Because when one is no longer able to suppress or to hold on, for all they've got, when it comes up, it comes out.
Physicality is an
It
issue.
comes out.
Yes, it is.
I'm just now thinking of the cases I've worked with, and you're right. I would say that in those couples, often where domestic violence has happened, it's the female that has had trouble with the law and
Yes.
trouble with it. Again, the narcissist is maybe even quicker to step out and cheat, but the fury for which that they're met is well, it seems to involve law enforcement. I hadn't thought of that. That's a really good part of it for counselors to know that's lurking behind there, because obviously everybody comes into a session with a counselor and we're more or less on our good behavior. So the idea of who might be more physical or step beyond the appearance of knowing how to behave, that they do need to know that. That's
It is. And for the narcissist, if it is in that regard where the borderline physically lashes out at the narcissist, the fear for the narcissist is,
It's like the sadist masochist,
yes.
that type of interaction. Because you're right, the narcissist, they don't sweat. They just dance around, moving around, while the borderline is so consumed with that emotion. And that emotion is their weakness. It's their strength, it's their weakness. And that emotion makes them do things that make no sense at all, that an intelligent person would not normally do. They are so involved and saturated with that passion, emotion, that they act like a little puppet. And the narcissist pulls the strings. And
Whereas the borderline is full of empathy, sometimes too much empathy.
oh yes,
Whereas the narcissist, there's 0 to none.
But that borderline will project empathy on that narcissist.
Yes.
Oh,
He's the only one that understands me.
Yes.
he's so loving and so giving. He's so generous.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
He's not feeding me what he thinks I need. He really, really understands me.
He does. Yes. Buttons being pushed. And you're like, oh no, it's called player with an A. That's what that is. It is not real,
Yes.
but they believe it's real because they want to.
But you're talking about the type B personality.
Yeah.
They say that they want, yet when I look at, again, small sample set, but more than I would have thought that I've gotten, they never pick that person.
No.
They may talk about wanting that person. They always pick the loudmouth narcissist
Yeah.
because they're giving them the drama. Because we talk about that emotional, sort of need and empathy, but also it's an explosion, and I need the combustible material. Because if I have a type B who's not giving me that, well, yeah, he's a nice guy.
But
there wasn't something.
The proverbial but.
Right. But it wasn't like what I'm used to. It's like, loud and dysfunctional. Well, yeah.
It's like having Roman candles and birthday candles.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to get satisfied with birthday candles
When you really like Roman candles.
when you like Roman candles. But it depends on how much control that borderline has over themselves as to what they will allow themselves to tolerate. And like you said, a lot of the borderlines are raised in homes where the female caregiver is a borderline, and that's how they learn a lot of this. Because we know BPD, it is genealogical. It is hereditary, but it's also environmental. It's that whole diathesis stress model where it goes on both sides. But we do know that it's learned, that there's a big learning component. So isn't that what they saw growing up? I mean,
It was modeled for them.
didn't they see an explosive relationship between mother and her significant other? Isn't that the way relationships are supposed to be?
Because that's their norm, is what they know. Here, I like to talk about our social circle. We throw the term out all the time. We have alpha females.
We do. We do. Here we have a lot of, I don't think we have any B females. Let's just go that route. Yeah.
And that dynamic, again, paired with the narcissist, having that alpha female personality typed with the narcissist. Again, that combustibility, because it's, that stance, that position of being so strong and passionate, I think presents more of a challenge to the arrogance of the narcissist, maybe.
Definitely pushes the button. It basically demands a response. Like their perception is, well, now I have to respond.
Yes.
Even if the issue that you're talking about, you didn't make change correctly, but I must respond. I must respond in kind of again, sort of overly arrogant, overly domineering way, because I feel that my area has been attacked.
I must.
And again, when we try to talk about using the absolutes and acting in absolutes, this takes often a long time because neither side sees their behavior as absolutes, and you have to stop them constantly and say, I never, he always, okay, see, that's an absolute. No, it's not.
It never has been.
Yeah, and it never has been. No, it's not. It never has been.
It does take a while. It's easy for people with borderline to get frustrated with therapy because it is not a quick fix.
Yeah.
Because there's so much that has gone in to creating this personality. It takes a while. And even after the therapy, there's work to be done. I know people diagnosed with BPD who work every single day on trying to maintain certain aspects of their personality. And even after you think that you've got it taken care of and you've got all your tools, you have one really bad day. Or maybe you're around a situation that's extremely negative and you soak up a whole lot of negativity. And then the next thing you know, you're the negative one.
Yeah.
Right.
Without even realizing it. So it is an ongoing situation, but it's about learning those tools. And I know that with the DBT group, the way that we do that here, Miss Lynette is one of the leaders of the DBT group. And then we do the skills group, which is Miss Lynette, and she has several people who work with her. We do the skills group, and then we do the individual therapy along with the skills group. The individual therapy is done by DBT trained therapists, licensed, nationally certified therapists. And then within the skills group and the individual, then Dr. Turley steps in, and we have a couple of other marriage therapists too. And they step in depending on what the best fit is with that client and the significant other relationship. And then the individual therapist drops back to every other week. And then the skills group is still going on, and the marriage therapy is going on. And sometimes we double team, sometimes we don't. But that's what makes the difference and makes it last, is the breakthrough has to happen before the marriage therapy begins.
Yes.
Yes.
And can you tell me why that's important?
It's important because until, since we're talking about our war lines, until she's able to recognize and identify her triggers and what got her there in the first place, it would be counterproductive to send her into marriage therapy because, for one, they haven't been identified properly. Skill sets, coping skills have to be learned prior to, because that's a huge part of the issue, is not having the resources made available prior to, or
Yes.
having been taught how to have effective communication skills, how to articulate what one is feeling without it turning into a blow up or an argument. Looking at things, reframing, developing cope ahead skills, knowing that perhaps, I call them known variables, going into a situation that you know is going to be stressful based off of prior previous experience. And then you can use that cope ahead to really structure it in a way that you can go in, or one can go in and have this dialogue successfully and still come out on the winning end, knowing that they were able to maintain positive control of self and communicate effectively and still come out whole and not lose sight of self-respect. It's without losing who you are and keeping your dignity and still being able to function. Prior to having these skill sets put into place to take them into marriage therapy, again, would be counterproductive because she doesn't know yet. They're there and it's not impossible to learn. I mean, some are a little bit more resistant than others, which is okay. We all are when it comes to certain things. But prior to going into marriage therapy, having those skill sets coming in, it's like, okay, now we can have a conversation. Now we can actually hold and have a productive conversation.
And resolution
Yes.
can be made. So there is a process to it, and that's why it works so well. We bring in a couple of other elements to DBT here at Counseling Solutions, and we will talk about that on another episode of Discussions at the Roundtable. Dr. Turley, we appreciate very much you coming in and talking to us.
Thanks for having me.
And if you guys have any need of these services, please call us immediately and we will get you in.
Yes.
Take care.
Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Until next time. Bye. Pause. Go to the square.
Let me get my glasses on. I don't know where the square is.
Go over to the right just a little
Go
bit.
to the right. Right here?
No.
Right here?
Nope.
No.
Go back where you were. Go back.
Oh, right
Stop.
here?
Yep.
Oh.